All right, so questions on the requirements document. Go ahead.
Just looking around, there's like a bunch of different formats online. Do you just want like a bulleted list of a Word document, or do you want something formatted in a certain way?
Well, I definitely want something formatted in an appropriate way, not necessarily a certain way. I mean, if a bulleted list is appropriate for yours, then that's okay. I mean, I gave you a document to kind of follow. Did you?
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty detailed one.
Answers a lot of questions. Gives you kind of a format too.
So surrounded by some pretty intense heat. The safe spots seem to be Labend and Mesa. It's over on the left. It's like a big, long, well thought. I mentioned it in the video that you didn't watch. I was here. That's even better. What did you do to your hair?
I tried to cut it short, kind of like what Nick has. You tried? But then all of a sudden, it just went really short, and I was like, oh.
So this is what you were doing instead of turning in idea papers?
Oh.
That makes sense.
I had other things that I was doing, but
Other things I was doing as well, but this was one of them.
yeah.
It makes sense. All right, so does that answer your question? That document's pretty, but there isn't like a specific format. I mean, understand the purpose of the requirements document is to act as that contract between you and the client, and also kind of you and me for what I'm expecting you to turn in. So whatever format you need to get your ideas into, so that it acts like that. It should, unambiguously tell me what you're going to be accomplishing. Not necessarily how you're going to accomplish it. That's what the specifications document's for, but unambiguously what you will be accomplishing. So probably if you have a bulleted list, it's probably going to have several sub-bullets detailing out here's a major feature and here's the 20 things that comprise that kind of stuff. All right, other questions? It's exhilarating stuff here. Go ahead.
You said it needs to be as long as it needs to be. What's like the average? Couple thousand pages.
Students are so lazy. Like, by average, I mean, what's the minimal length that won't make you laugh? Well, I mean, if you're going to laugh but still give me a decent grade, I'm okay with it. I would say the average length of good requirements documents are between
20 and 40 pages.
No, shorter than that. Probably 10 and 15 pages. Something like that. But I mean, understand that that's not necessarily just wall-to-wall text. There's it's not single-spaced 15 pages of text. It's a lot of formatting and, headers and, here's a section, here's some stuff under that section. So, if you were actually to write out all the text from it, I mean, maybe it's a 5 to 7 page paper, something like that in terms of total text. But usually the formatting drives it to a longer, because it's got to be a document that you can quickly find stuff in. So it shouldn't read like a paper. It should be a reference, if that makes sense.
So would it be good if it had like an index page?
Oh, well, that's not unreasonable. In fact, many templates would have that. An index page makes the most sense when you have a very, very, very large document where you're saying, go to page 36 to get to this. In this case, I would expect the documents aren't going to be that big. So you probably don't need to tell them to turn to page 3 to find this section. It should be, it shouldn't take real long to flip through it, but I should be able to quickly get to, see the top level requirement features and then be able to read more in depth to that. So the first thing that'll come to mind when I read a top level feature is, okay, what does he mean by that? And then underneath you should have an explanation of what you mean. When I say I'm going to implement X, Y, and Z, that means I'm going to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And that means I've implemented X, Y, Z. And then the specifications document, you'll tell me how you accomplish each of those steps, what technologies you might use, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, did that answer your question or not?
Yeah.
So it's still, the answer still as long as it needs to be to unambiguously describe your project. If you can magically do that in a half a page, great. I think that's unlikely, but I guess that's that. What else? Go ahead.
So when you're doing this requirements document, you put all the features on there that you were telling me that's essential for this project to be a successful kind of project or fully functional. How deep do we go into each specific feature, as to because I feel like I'd be blurring the line between how I get it done and what it actually is, I guess, because I don't know where I should stop and saying
Sure.
what this does and how it's going to be doing things, in what ways.
Right. So you could imagine that your audience is somebody who has a reasonable understanding of kind of the domain in which you're solving your problem. So you don't have to speak to the person reading your document as if they're a child that doesn't know what the word "the" is. So, you can assume that somebody has a reasonable idea of your idea from your idea paper. So they pretty much know big picture what you're trying to accomplish. And what you're doing is articulating, because, there's actually a problem if you get too detailed, because then it's going to be hard to really almost check things off. So you want to go through probably in a first pass and just create all the high-level requirements that you're going to have in there. And then go back through and read each of those and say, is this self-explanatory, or do I need to explode this out into a couple of bullet points to kind of explain what this is for, how we will be able to measure whether this is done, that type of stuff. So if a bullet point is self-explanatory, displays the username. Okay? You don't have to go and say, well, we start with the first character of the username. And we concatenate onto, well, no, that's specifications. We somehow determine the second character of the username. You don't have to go that far in. So, I would start by doing all the high-level requirements and then go in and put more detail into ones where it seems ambiguous.
So what about design of the app? Because I know there's some sort of graphical stuff that you have to do, and I'm not as familiar with that as other things. How do we go about getting that accomplished?
Yeah.
Make it look pretty, I guess.
Well, so first of all, I would say looking pretty is a substantially lower priority than functioning well for the project. I think, as you're talking about requirements, for instance, let's say they need to be able to create a user account. Well, part of that requirement is going to be giving them some sort of reasonable user interface for entering in a username, password, and email address or something like that. I don't think you need to go into much more depth. I'm not going to look at the requirements document in the end. I'm going to say, well, I thought you were going to use a shade of blue. Okay, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is more feature. What will you be able to accomplish with the tool? And part of what you're going to accomplish with the tool is maybe user registration. But you're probably not going to talk about how that user interface might look, because that's going to be in the specifications document. And the specifications document might say, well, for user registration, we're going to require first name, last name, email, and social security number, serial number. Have you heard that? That's another online thing. Some guy had a pizza shop, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Pizza Shop. He called up and his answer machine was like, this is Arnold's Pizza Shop. All the pizzas come with 9mm bullets and pepperonis. And he goes in and says, if you want a pizza, leave your serial number, how tall you are, and all this stuff. I don't know where that came from, but that's part of the registration process for your app, I suppose. So that's going to have to be in there now. Okay, we've already set a precedent. But that would be specifications document stuff, how you will accomplish user registration. So a requirements document would say the user must be able to create an account. The user must be able to log into their account. The user must be able to do this, that, and the next thing. that kind of stuff. And then if any of those things aren't self-explanatory from the one little sentence, then you can go down a level and either put a sentence or two that explains it, or if you need to further break it down into a couple bullet points, that's fine as well. So I would say your goal is to unambiguously describe your project, the requirements for your project, in as short of a space as possible. So maybe that's what Abe kind of wants to hear, is I don't want you to just arbitrarily make this document long. I want this document to be correct. Okay, so the purpose is to unambiguously describe every requirement I should expect your project to have. The ideal world is that's going to be in as compressed of a format as it can possibly be while still being unambiguous and complete. All right, so do that. If you can do this in 2 or 3 or 4 pages, that's great. I'm going to have a nice compressed document that I can go through when I'm grading this in the end and say, okay, well, he hit this requirement, this requirement, this requirement. That's perfect. That's what I want. Now, the suspicion is that in order for you to think about this project, because that's really what you're spending this week doing, is thinking about what the project will ultimately be, taking your idea from big picture to 10,000 foot view down to the 1,000 foot view, or the 500 foot view, something like that. So it's likely going to be longer than a couple of pages, just because you're going to have to get all those requirements out there, and then you're going to have to start thinking, how long would these take me to do? And what you might end up with is let's say 30 requirements. And you might say, well, based on the math, I plan on, and they're ordered in priority order. You might say, based on the math, I'm going to do the first 16. Because based on my estimated amount of time, those are the ones I feel I can accomplish this semester. Here would be phase 2 type requirements. I'm not going to remove them from the document, because I might need to drag one of these guys in if something up here is substantially easier than I expected it to be, or on the other hand, isn't doable for whatever reason. Now I need to have some other requirements to pull in. So you might have 30 requirements, of which you're saying you'll do 17. Kind of make sense? So this is really an exploration document. You're not making this document to make me happy. You're making this document to help you complete your project. All right, what else? Nothing? Go ahead.
Are there certain categories within our app that we are going to have to, that would be good to include in this? Like you can say user input, output from the app, or information available. Like, is there certain organization things that we can do to make that the most efficient kind of document, I guess? Or ideas on what we should do?
Well, so I mean, some of those things you just mentioned there kind of sound like specifications to me, like how you're going to accomplish stuff. But if your application needs to be able to generate some reports, for example, you might put in the requirements document report generation, and then as a subtopic underneath that, we need to be able to run this. All reports will be generated as PDFs, something like that. And then you might say we're going to have a report that does this. We're going to have another report that does this, and another report that does this. So you specified that the reports will be done in PDFs. You haven't told me how you're going to ultimately accomplish that, but that it will be in a PDF format, and that the requirements indicate that these 3 reports will be there. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you're asking? So be as detailed as possible, but don't try to answer questions that you don't know the answer to yet. Part of this document, part of this process is to bring those questions to the surface. In fact, I would fully expect you to have things on this document where you're going to say, well, here's something the app needs to be able to do, or the solution needs to be able to do. And at this point in time, you have no idea how you're going to actually accomplish that. That's next week's job. That's the specifications document. Going back through those requirements and saying, okay, well, maybe most of them you kind of have a decent idea how you might approach it, but there's going to be a couple of guys on there where they're kind of the meat of the project, the scary parts of the project, where you're going to say, well, now I need to research some technologies that might be appropriate for this. That kind of makes sense? And then you kind of mentioned this a few minutes ago, I guess. There is somewhat of a blurry line between the requirements document and the specifications document. So always ask yourself, if you're asking, should this be in the requirements document? The answer is yes, if it dictates something that you will deliver, not how you will accomplish something. The how you accomplish stuff goes in the specifications document. Whether or not it will exist goes in the requirements document. So requirements document, you could say time travel. Specifications document, it's going to be a problem for that bullet point. Okay? But that's an easy bullet point in the requirements document. Must support time travel.
If you're talking about the Apple Watch, you can time travel.
It's true, I did that earlier. And then I forgot to go back, and I thought it was 17 minutes long, in the future. Because it does actually adjust the time. All right, what else? I assume everybody is well underway on their document. Anybody done with it yet? Anybody over 10 pages already?
Getting there.
So you haven't even started.
No,
Getting there.
I already had a baseline. I'm getting close to 10 already.
Oh, 10 from your 9-page one from last year?
It was like 7.
It's very nice.
Progress.
I suppose. All right. Any other questions? It's your opportunity. We'll stay as long as you need me.
I always need you.
Going once. Going twice. I'll take bribes. What do you got?
The Tears
What's that?
3 Young Goats.
What? I haven't received the bribe yet. You can talk about bribes in the recording, and it's just the joke until it actually happens.
The Blood of Baby Chicken.
Isn't that from the movie Major League when Serrano wanted to sacrifice the chicken? Couldn't find a live chicken, so I just got a 20-piece from KFC. It's just going to have to do. All right. I will see everybody on Tuesday. And your requirements document should be submitted. And we will talk about the specifications document then.
Probably the